Chapter 4 of The White Linen Nurse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The White Linen Nurse by Eleanor Hallowell Abbott. Chapter 4. Like a train traveler coming out of a long, smoky, smothery tunnel into the clean-tasting light, the white linen nurse came out of the prudish-smelling hospital into the riotous mud and posy promise of the young April afternoon. The god of hysteria had certainly not deserted her. In all the full, effervescent reaction of her brainstorm, fairly bubbling with dimples, fairly foaming with curls, light-footed, light-hearted, most ecstatically light-headed, she tripped down into the sunshine as though the great, harsh granite steps that marked her descent were nothing more nor less than a gigantic, old horny-fingered hand passing her blithely out to some deliciously unknown Lilliputian adventure. As she pranced across the soggy April sidewalk to what she supposed was the senior surgeon's perfectly empty automobile, she became conscious suddenly that the rear seat of the car was already occupied. Out from an unseasonable snuggle of sable furs and flaming red hair, a small, peevish face peered forth at her with frank curiosity. "Why, hello!" beamed the white linen nurse. "Who are you?" With unmistakable hostility, the haughty little face retreated into its furs and its red hair. "Hush!" commanded a shrill, childish voice. "Hush, I say! I'm a cripple, and very bad-tempered. Don't speak to me!" "Oh, my glory!" gasped the white linen nurse. "Oh, my glory! Glory, glory!" Without any warning whatsoever, she felt suddenly like nothing at all, rigged out in an exceedingly shabby old ulster and an excessively homely black slouch hat. In a desperate attempt at tangible tomboyish nonchalance, she tossed her head and thrust her hands down deep into her big ulster pockets. That the bleak hat reflected no decent, featherish consciousness of being tossed, that the big threadbare pockets had no bottoms to them, merely completed her startled sense of having been in some way blotted right out of existence. Behind her back, the senior surgeon's huge fur-coated approach dawned blissfully like the thud of a rescue party. But if the senior surgeon's blunt, wholesome invitation to ride had been perfectly sweet when he prescribed it for her in the superintendent's office, the invitation had certainly soured most amazingly in the succeeding 10 minutes. Abruptly now, without any greeting, he reached out and opened the rear door of the car, and nodded curtly for her to enter there. Instantly, across the face of the little crippled girl already ensconced in the tonneau, a single flash of light went zigzagging crookedly from brow to chin, and was gone again. "Hello, fat father!" piped the shrill little voice. "Hello, fat father!" Yet so subtly was the phrase mouthed to save your soul you could not have proved just where the greeting ended and the taunt began. There was nothing subtle, however, about the way in which the senior surgeon's hand shot out and slammed the tonneau door bang bang again on its original passenger. His face was crimson with anger. Brusquely he pointed to the front seat. "You may sit in there with me, Miss Malgregor," he thundered. "Yes, sir," crooned the white linen nurse. Meek as an oiled machine, she scuttled to her appointed place. Once more in smothered giggle and unprotesting acquiescence, she sensed the resumption of eternal discipline. Already, in just this thrice of time, she felt her rampant young mouth resettle tamely into lines of smug, determinant serenity. Already across her idle lap she felt her clasped fingers begin to frost and tingle again, like a cheerfully non-concerned bunch of live wires, waiting the one authoritative signal to connect somebody, anybody, with this world or the next. Already the facile tip of her tongue seemed fairly loaded and cocked, like a revolver, with all the approximate yes sirs, no sirs, that she thought she should probably need. But the only immediate remarks that the senior surgeon addressed to any one were addressed distinctly to the crank of his automobile. "Damn having a chauffeur who gets drunk the one day of the year when you need him most," he muttered under his breath, as with the same exquisitely sensitive fingers that could have dissected like a caress the nervous system of a humming-bird, or reset unbruisingly the broken wing of a butterfly, he hurled his 180 pounds of infuriate brute strength against the calm, chronic, mechanical stubbornness of that auto-crank. "Damn!" he swore on the upward pull. "Damn!" he gasped on the downward push. "Damn!" he cursed and sputtered and spluttered. Purple with effort, bulging-eyed with strain, reeking with sweat, his frenzied outburst would have terrorized the entire hospital staff. With an odd little twinge of homesickness, the white linen nurse slid cautiously out to the edge of her seat so that she might watch the struggle better. For thus, with dripping foreheads and knotted neck muscles and breaking backs and rankly tempestuous language, did the untutored menfolk of her own beloved homeland hurl their great strength against bulls and boulders and refractory forest trees. Very startlingly, as she watched, a brand new thought went zigzagging through her consciousness. Was it possible, was it even so much as remotely possible, that the great senior surgeon, the great, wonderful, altogether formidable, altogether unapproachable senior surgeon, was just a stripped ruthlessly of all his social superiority, of all his professional halo, of all his scientific achievement, the senior surgeon stood suddenly forth before her, a mere man, just like other men, just exactly like other men, like the sick drug clerk, like the new-born millionaire baby, like the doddering old Dutch gaffer. The very delicacy of such a thought drove the blood, panic-stricken, from her face. It was the indelicacy of the thought that brought the blood surging back again to brow, to cheeks, to lips, even to the tips of her ears. Glancing up casually from the roar and rumble of his abruptly repentant engine, the senior surgeon swore once more under his breath to think that any female sitting perfectly idle and non-concerned in a $7,000 car should have the nerve to flaunt such a furiously strenuous color. Bristling with resentment and mink furs, he strode around the fender and stumbled with increasing irritation across the white linen nurse's knees to his seat. Just for an instant his famous fingers seemed to flash with apparent inconsequence towards one bit of mechanism and another. Then, like a huge pretentious pill floated on smoothest syrup, the car slid down the yawning street into the congested city. Altogether monotonously in terms of pain and dirt and drug and disease, the city wafted itself in and out of the white linen nurse's well-grooved consciousness. From every filthy street corner, sodden age or starved babyhood reached out its fluttering pulse to her. Then suddenly, sweet as a draught, through a fever-tainted room, the squalid city freshened into jocund, luxuriant suburbs, with rollicking tennis courts, and flaming yellow forsythia blossoms, and green velvet lawns prematurely posied with pale exotic hyacinths and great scarlet splotches of lusty tulips. Beyond this hectic horticultural outburst, the leisurely spring faded out again into April's naturally sallow colors. Glossy and black as an endless typewriter ribbon, the narrow State road seemed to wind itself everlastingly in, and in, and in, on some hidden spool of the car's mysterious mechanism. Clickety-click, click-clack, faster than any human mind could think, faster than any human hand could finger, hurtling up hazardous hills of thought, sliding down facile valleys of fancy, roaring with emphasis, shrieking with punctuation, the great car yielded itself perforce to fate's dictation. Robbed successively of the city's humanitarian pang, of the suburb's aesthetic pleasure, The white linen nurse found herself precipitated suddenly into a mere blur of sight, a mere chaos of sound.